So what would it take to bring you back to Games Workshop? What could they do to repair some of that goodwill? The past couple of months with the launching of Warhammer Plus, going back to the release of Cursed City, and just generally how Games Workshop has been focusing on eliminating the very community that has been promoting, building, working in a partnership with Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar, but to a lesser degree. What would it take to bring you back? What would it take to feel possibly good again about playing Games Workshop games? And right now, my relationship with Games Workshop is such that I love Warhammer 40,000. I love the community. I still play Warhammer 40,000. Absolutely. But it's interesting to see how not only my spending habits, but how I've shifted completely away where we've got this things called Games Workshop and they're doing something with Warhammer 40,000, but I'm really, not that I never was not plugged into the community, I'm really plugged into the community here. And I've really been finding myself investing more and more into world building, into community building, and not only enjoying the models that I have, which I always strive to do, but really approaching it from almost a role-playing perspective. The heck with GW. Let's see what we can do with this thing called Warhammer 40,000. I think the closest analogy would be Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, that's back in the day where I started playing D&D. It occupies a tremendous place in my heart. Still play Kryn all the time. One of the achievements in my gaming career, if we could call that, was passing the test of high sorcery. And from that perspective, not that I don't enjoy the current edition of D&D, not that I don't enjoy D&D 4.0. I've been on record saying I enjoy 4.0 for what it was and what it tried to do at the time. But in playing AD&D, essentially with it being a defunct system. Now, GW is not defunct. They're still putting out rules. They're still putting out models. They're still putting out kits. It's supported. But AD&D essentially being a dead system means there is no influence. It's up to the individual to play it how they want to play it and to community and world build from that perspective. So I'm still in the game. Grey Knights are still fighting, still going for chaos, glory, still playing my Eldar, getting that space elf magic, and of course, Necrons, Tyranids, and all that, but really taking a step back and saying, I'm going to see what GW does. Now, what would it take to bring us back? I wanted to offer that as my perspective where I am right now. I think if Games Workshop, look, prices are never going to come down. I have no illusion that prices are going to come in line with reality, somewhat reality. Beyond supply chain issues and inflation and just the cost of doing business before we even get into return on value for shareholders, just all of that logistical stuff that's going to be required to put that plastic, we're going to put 3D printing aside for a moment, that plastic on the table, that's going to exist. And Games Workshop turning a profit, I acknowledge that this is a very, very focused hobby and there's a price of entry. There is. I mean, maybe it's like some more expensive hobbies that are out there. This is just where we are. So I have no illusion that Games Workshop is going to slash some prices. Maybe they would do a deal on a couple of sets, but they've always had some good value for some of their sets that are out there or some of their bundles that are out there. So I'm under no illusion that will change or that will ever change. I mean, that's just the nature of the hobby. But what I would like to see is just a partnership with the community, reaching out to the community and saying, hey, look, we have to protect our IP. And I mean, of course, they'll have a more elegant way, a more silver tongue way of saying it. We got to protect our IP. We want to dominate the market because we want to return value to the shareholders. But we're going to set down some guidelines that you as a community member can work with. We're going to give some concrete examples that if you want to take the narrative and run with it, kind of here's how you can do it. I won't say open source like D&D has done, but acknowledging something along the way that the community does really support and has hand in hand built this world with Games Workshop. From that perspective, and it's never going to be the full way that I might wish list or fanboy or imagine, but just that reach out, something other than corporate or legal. Just this idea of maybe working with the community. Now, the question I ask is, are things just too big and too far gone? I mean, if we were around GW in the 90s, pre-internet or early internet, what sites were out there? How many players were out there? It was an ecosystem that you could become more aware of and control a little bit easier. Well, now, even with social media, YouTube, various legacy tech forums and things like that, and blogs, which are still around, still very important and dominant, looking at it from that perspective, I really have to wonder, and this is not being an apologist, have things gotten so big for Games Workshop? They're like, look, we trademarked it. We trademarked Warhammer. So we got to hit everybody with the Warhammer because it's just too big to control. So we really have to approach it from that perspective. I mean, maybe that's true. But if they, in good faith, they could start by reprinting Cursed City. You want the wish list? Do Cursed City right and support that and push some of that content out. That's just a personal opinion on my side. But then work with the community, put some guidelines, and within those guidelines, offer some support and encouragement. And if things do deviate from that, yes, absolutely, the banhammer. I get it. But to have that reach out, I think would be important. And I think that would put a lot of players back on track with GW, which leads into the next question. I'm going to leave us with this. Has enough damage been done? You know, at the switch of every edition of 40K, we lose players for various reasons, for various legitimate reasons. Maybe you weren't feeling 40K for a while and you're like, look, this is a good time to bow out. Maybe you really liked some aspect of the game and it was a radical shift. You know, we saw this with 5th edition to 6th edition, jumping from vehicle hammer to more kind of monstrous creature, mixed infantry type, stuff like that, and vehicles. But there was a mass exodus from that. So in every edition that happens. This recent exodus that I've seen, because I've seen it in the Battletech community, people jumping over, just in my little part of the inner sphere here, I've seen it happen where the numbers are enough. You know, even just looking at my meta, the numbers are enough that it has to be repeating elsewhere. Now, is that going to be felt in GW headquarters? I don't know about that, but it's interesting to see the exodus and the shift in players and player personality. The only time I have ever seen this is when there's a change in edition. And even then, it's nuanced and it's very, very understood. So I have to wonder, has there been a shift, not the shift, not the end shift, but has there been a shift in players and how they feel about Games Workshop, how they feel about Warhammer 40,000? And I leave with this because the two are vastly separate. I think the past couple of months with Plus and how they've handled the YouTube community and various banhammer systems, in my mind, I've now split the two. Got this thing called Games Workshop over here, and I've got this thing called Warhammer 40,000 over there.